How do I tolerate this noise from fools? The billionaire's voice rolled in low Arabic meant for no one but his companion. But Elena heard every word. The water pitcher trembled in her hand. A single drop fell echoing louder than it should have. Around them, New York's elite laughed over truffle and wine blind to the small rebellion about to ignite. She looked him in the eye and replied calm but cutting, "Patience is the master of morals." 4 words. The hum of the room died instantly. He thought he was speaking in secrets. He didn't know he'd just awakened the ghost of a scholar long buried beneath her silence. Aurelia wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater. Perched on the 60th floor of a midtown Manhattan skyscraper, its floor-to-ceiling windows presented New York City as a glittering carpet of diamonds, a spectacle for the gods who dined within. The air was thick with the scent of white truffle vintage Bordeaux and the faint metallic tang of money old and new. Conversations were a low, confident hum, the soundtrack of deals being closed and dynasties being managed. Into this theater walked Elena Garcia, almost a ghost in her crisp black uniform. At 26, she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of exhaustion and efficiency in equal measure. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was a carefully constructed mask of pleasant neutrality. To the patrons of Aurelia, she was part of the scenery, a functioning piece of the exquisite clockwork that made their evening perfect. They didn't see the shadows under her eyes, or the way her hands, though steady when pouring a $5,000 bottle of Shadow. Margot trembled slightly when she was alone in the staff locker room. Tonight her section included Table 7, a particularly challenging quartet of finance bros celebrating a recent IPO. Their leader, a man named Chad Warrington, whose jaw seemed permanently clenched in a smirk, had made a sport of tormenting her all evening. He'd sent back a perfectly cooked steak, claiming it was psychologically underdone, quizzed her on the esoteric origins of a cheese she knew he couldn't pronounce, and made a thinly veiled joke about her needing the tips to pay for English classes. Elena absorbed it all with practiced grace, her replies brief, polite, and betraying none of the simmering rage in her gut. She needed this job. It paid for the tiny shared apartment in Queens, the medication for her recurring nightmares, and the faint, desperate hope that she could one day feel safe again. Then he arrived, Julian Croft. His entrance caused a ripple in the fabric of the room. The hum of conversation didn't stop, but its pitch changed, infused with a new awareness. Croft wasn't just rich, he was tectonic. His company, Croft Global, had its tendrils in everything from satellite technology to sustainable agriculture. He was a kingmaker, a market mover, and notoriously private. He was seated at a secluded corner booth accompanied by his longtime advisor, Marcus Thorne. Croft looked weary. His silver-streaked hair was slightly unkempt, and his cause as he looked out over the city was distant. He and Marcus spoke in low tones, ignoring the thorning attention of the restaurant's owner. Elena was assigned their table, her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a different league of pressure. She approached with a pitcher of iced water, her movements fluid and silent. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice a soft murmur. "May I get you started with something to drink?" Croft didn't even look at her. He was staring at Chad Warrington's table where their laughter had just escalated in volume. Chad had just made another crude joke, and his friends braided in appreciation. A flash of profound disgust crossed Croft's face. It was a fleeting, unguarded expression. He turned to Marcus, his voice low and laced with a deep-seated fatigue. He didn't speak in English. He spoke in a rich Gutal Arabic, a dialect Elena hadn't heard in years. A dialect that smelled of her father's library of jasmine and old paper kai as a ha-alhama, he murmured. "How do I tolerate this noise from fools?" It was a rhetorical question, a private sigh of frustration shared between two men who believed they were in a sonic fortress, utterly alone in their understanding. Marcus was about to reply, a placating murmur on his lips, but he never got the chance. Elena was standing beside the table, her hand holding the water pitcher frozen mid-air. The Arabic words had struck her not like a foreign tongue, but like a key turning in a lock deep inside her soul. It was the language of her childhood, the language of poetry and intellectual debate, the language of her father before he was taken. In that moment, she wasn't a waitress. She wasn't an invisible servant. The carefully constructed walls of her new life crumbled. Chad Warrington's grating laugh echoed across the restaurant again. The billionaire's weary disgust resonated with her own, and without thinking, without planning, she responded to the question that wasn't meant for her. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes meeting Julian Croft's for the first time. They were a startlingly clear blue, and in them she saw surprise flicker. Her voice, when it came, was not the soft, subservient tone she used for taking orders. It was clear, resonant, and carried the flawless, educated accent of a Damascus scholar. She spoke in the same classical Arabic. Al-Hilm said Alak. She said, "Patience is the master of morals." 4 words. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if a soundproof barrier had descended upon Aurelia. Conversations stuttered and died. Forks clattered against plates. For the first time all night, the entire restaurant was united in a single shared experience. Utter bewildered silence. Marcus Thorne, a man who had faced down hostile corporate takeovers and government inquiries without flinching physically, recoiled, his mouth falling slightly open. Chad Warrington and his table, who had been mid-Gapore, froze. Their smirks evaporated, replaced by confused, slack-jawed stares. "Who was this waitress? What just happened?" Mr. Dubois, the restaurant manager who had been gliding through the room like a shark, stopped dead in his tracks, a look of pure panic on his face. An employee had spoken out of turn to Julian Croft. This was a disaster of apocalyptic proportions, but the most profound reaction was Julian Croft's. He didn't move a muscle. His gaze was locked on Elena, and the weariness in his eyes was replaced by an electrifying intensity. It was a look of disbelief, of shock, but also of something else, a piercing, analytical curiosity. He wasn't just looking at a waitress anymore. He was looking at her. He was seeing a puzzle, an impossibility that had just manifested at his table. Elena's own mind caught up to her actions. The blood drained from her face. What had she done? She had broken every rule. She had spoken out of turn, addressed a guest directly without being spoken to. And worse, she had revealed a part of herself she had kept buried for 5 agonizing years. She had made herself visible. In her world, visible meant vulnerable. She expected to be fired on the spot. She expected shouting humiliation. She braced herself, her knuckles white on the handle of the water pitcher. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Julian Croft slowly leaned forward. He ignored the rest of the room, his universe having shrunk to the space between him and this enigmatic young woman. He spoke again, this time in a softer, more deliberate Arabic. "Mini Hardy Alasa, from where do you have such eloquence?" The question was a test. He wasn't just asking about her language skills. He was asking who she was. Elena's training, her very soul steeped in the proverbs and literature her father had taught her, took over. She answered with another proverb. Her voice trembling but firmly felled, "is in the chests of men, not in the lines of books." A slow smile spread across Julian Croft's face. It transformed him, erasing the lines of fatigue and revealing a glimpse of the brilliant, formidable mind that had built an empire. He had sent out a signal into the void expecting nothing, and the void had answered with poetry. He turned to Marcus, whose face was still a mask of shock, and switched back to English. His voice was calm, but it carried an authority that cut through the silence and commanded the attention of everyone present. "Marcus," he said, "it appears we have been dining in the presence of a scholar." The spell was broken. The room erupted in a flurry of hushed whispers. Patrons at nearby tables leaned towards each other, their eyes darting between the waitress and the billionaire. Who was she? Mr. Dubois was the first to react, scurrying towards the table, with the frantic energy of a man trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship. His face was pale, his smile a grotesque grimace of panic. "Mr. the Croft, sir, I am so terribly sorry," he stammered, shooting Elena a look of pure venom. "This is completely unacceptable. This employee has violated our protocol. She will be dealt with immediately. Please allow me to." Croft raised a single hand, and Dubois' words died in his throat. "You will do nothing of the sort, Antoine." Croft said, his tone dangerously quiet. "This young lady has just provided the most interesting moment I've experienced in this restaurant in a decade. What she will be dealt with is my gratitude." He turned his piercing gaze back to Elena. The intensity was still there, but it was tempered with a genuine curiosity. "What is your name, Elena, sir?" "Elena Garcia." Her voice was barely a whisper. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, terrifying dread. "Elena," he repeated, savoring the name. "Well, Elena, your timing is impeccable. Your Arabic is even better." From across the room, Chad Warrington, having recovered from his initial shock, saw an opportunity to reassert his dominance. He scoffed loudly, a sound designed to draw attention. "What is this? Some kind of party trick? Did you hire a scholar to pour your water, Croft? Maybe she can fetch my coat in Farsi." The insult hung in the air, crude and ugly. Elena flinched, the familiar sting of humiliation returning. But this time, she wasn't alone. Julian Croft's head turned slowly, pinning Chad Warrington, with a look so cold it seemed to drop the temperature of the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Mr. Warrington Croft said, his voice like silk, wrapped steel. "I remember the due diligence report on your company's IPO. Your entire international strategy was based on a flawed translation of a Mandarin contract. It cost your initial investors $70 million. I'd venture that a bit more scholarship in your organization might be advisable before you mock it in others." The color drained from Chad's face. He had been publicly, surgically, and devastatingly felited. He sputtered, trying to form a retort, but no words came. He shrank back in his chair, his bravado utterly punctured, as the whispers in the room turned from Elena to him. Croft dismissed him as if he were a fly and returned his attention to Elena. "Please continue with your duties. We will have the sea bass and the risotto." He had given her an out, a return to the comfortable anonymity of her role. Numbly, Elena nodded. She filled their water glasses. Her hands now shaking uncontrollably, she took their order, her mind a complete blank, operating on pure muscle memory. As she turned to leave, Croft spoke again. "And Elena," she stopped her back to him. "Don't let anyone bother you for the rest of the night," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command that echoed throughout the silent restaurant. For the next hour, Elena moved through a dream. No one spoke to her beyond giving their orders. The other staff gave her a wide berth, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. Chad's table paid their bill in silence and left without meeting anyone's eye. Elena felt like she was floating outside her own body, watching a stranger perform her job. When Croft and Marcus finally prepared to leave, she brought them the check. Croft waved it away. "Marcus will handle that," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek, heavy wallet, but he didn't pull out cash. He produced a business card. It was thick black linen stock with only his name, Julian Croft, and a single private phone number embossed in silver. He laid it on the table. Then he took a pen from his jacket, a beautiful silver Mont Blanc, and wrote something on the back. He pushed it across the table towards her. "I am a man who believes that coincidences are merely unrecognized patterns," he said, his blue eyes searching hers. "And this feels like a very significant pattern. Call this number tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. sharp." Elena stared at the card. This couldn't be happening. As he stood to leave, he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper so only she could hear. The proverb you quoted. Patience is the master of morals. It implies that virtue is a choice made in adversity, a shield. I need to know what you are shielding yourself from. He and Marcus walked away, leaving a stunned restaurant in their wake. After a moment, Elena shakily picked up the card. Marcus had left a tip on the table. It was 10 $100 bills, $1,000 enough to cover her rent for a month. Her hands trembling, she turned over the business card. On the back, Croft had written another sentence in his elegant script. It was in Arabic, al-malatan ala-haduth. I know what that proverb really means. We need to talk. The subway ride from Manhattan to Queens was a jarring descent from one world into another. The hushed opulence of Aurelia dissolved into the screech of metal wheels, the cacophony of a dozen languages, and the weary faces of people whose lives were a daily struggle. For the first time in a long time, Elena felt she belonged more on this rattling train than in the gilded cage she had just left. She clutched Julian Croft's business card in her pocket, the sharp corner digging into her palm. It felt like a brand, a dangerous object that could either save her or destroy her. Her apartment was a cramped two-bedroom shared with a nursing student named Maria. When Elena walked in well past midnight, Maria was at their small kitchen table, highlighting a textbook under a flickering lamp. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Maria said, looking up. Elena sank into the opposite chair, pulling the card from her pocket and placing it on the table between them. She told Maria everything. The restaurant, Chad Warrington, the billionaire, the Arabic. As she spoke, the dam of composure she had maintained for 5 years began to crack. He knew Maria. She whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't just hear the words. He understood to the subtext. The proverbs I used, they aren't just common sayings. They are from the commentaries of Ibn Khaldun. My father and I used to debate them. The ghost wasn't in the restaurant. It was here in this tiny queen's kitchen. The ghost was her father, Dr. Nabil al-Jamil, a celebrated professor of history and philosophy at Damascus University. He wasn't just a father. He was her mentor, her intellectual sparring partner, her entire world. Their home wasn't a house, but a library filled with the scent of leather-bound books and strong cardamom coffee. He had taught her that language was not just for communication. It was a sanctuary, that a well-chosen proverb could be a shield, a sword, or a key. Her mind replayed the scene. Croft's question, "From where do you have such eloquence?" Her answer, "Knowledge is in the chests of men, not in the lines of books." It was more than a clever retort. It was a declaration of identity. It meant that her knowledge wasn't learned. It was lived. It was carried within her, a legacy passed down from her father. When the war began, when their city, a cradle of civilization, began to eat itself alive, that knowledge was all they had left. The memories came flooding back, sharp and painful, the day her father was taken. He had been part of a group of academics who secretly documented the destruction of historical sites, trying to preserve a record of their heritage against the tide of barbarism. It was quiet, dangerous work. One evening, they came for him, men in unmarked uniforms. There was no shouting, just a chilling bureaucratic finality. He had looked at Elena, his eyes full of love and terror, and spoken his last words to her in the classical Arabic they both cherished. "Kunikawa," he'd said. "Be strong." The escape had been a blur of terror. Her mother, her younger brother, and her smuggled out in the back of a truck. A harrowing journey across borders that ended with her alone, an asylum seeker in a country that felt as alien as the moon. Her mother and brother had been separated from her at a refugee camp in Turkey. She hadn't heard from them since. Every dollar she earned, every moment she survived, was fueled by the desperate, flickering hope of finding them again. She had changed her name from Layla Aljam to Elena Garcia, adopting her mother's maiden name from a distant Spanish ancestor. She buried her past, her education, her language. Ela the scholar died so that Elena the waitress could survive. And tonight, Julian Croft had resurrected her. "What do I do?" Elena asked, her eyes pleading with Maria. "This man, he's powerful. What if this is a trap? What if he's connected to someone from back then? People like him have connections everywhere." The paranoia that had been her constant companion for years was now screaming. Maria, ever the pragmatist, picked up the card. Julian Croft Elena. "This man is on the cover of Forbes. He's not some shadowy operative, he's a legitimate global titan. And he's not stupid. That thing he did to that Chad guy. That was calculated. He saw something in you he wants. What could he possibly want from me?" "A translator." Elena scoffed. "He could hire the best in the world from the UN. Maybe Maria said her expression serious. Or maybe it's not just about the language. You said it yourself." He understood the subtext. Maybe that's what he's looking for. Not a translator, a key. Elena stared at the phone number on the card. Calling it was a risk. It meant stepping out of the shadows, revealing who she truly was, and inviting the kind of attention that had gotten her father killed but not calling. That meant remaining a ghost, forever suffocating under the weight of a life that wasn't hers, forever haunted by the potential of what she could have been. Her father's last words echoed in her mind. Be strong. Strength wasn't just about survival. It was about choosing to live. She took a deep breath, the first steadying breath she'd taken all night. "I'm going to make the call." Punctually at 10:00 a.m. Elena stood on a busy street corner, her phone pressed to her ear, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had spent the morning choosing her clothes with more care than she had in years, settling on a simple black dress, the only one she owned, and a beige trench coat. She wanted to look professional, not like a waitress. A calm male voice answered on the second ring. "Mr. Croft's private line." "This is Elena Garcia," she said, surprised at how steady her own voice sounded. "He asked me to call. We've been expecting you, Miss Garcia," the voice replied. "It was Marcus Thorne. Mr. Croft would like to meet with you, not at his office. There is a private viewing at the Met this morning, the Islamic Art Wing. Please meet me at the main entrance in 30 minutes. The line went dead. The Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was an unexpected and brilliant choice, a public space yet private neutral ground and the specific wing. It was a message. 30 minutes later, Marcus Thorne, looking just as impeccable as he had the night before, greeted her with a nod and led her past the crowds through a velvet rope and into a silent, empty gallery. The air was cool and still. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating magnificent displays of calligraphy, intricate tile work, and ancient astrolabes. And there, standing before a 13th-century Syrian mikra, a prayer niche of stunning mosaic work, was Julian Croft. He was dressed not in a power's suit, but in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a professor, a curator of civilizations. "Miss Garcia," he said, turning to her. His smile was welcoming. "Thank you for coming. Do you find it beautiful?" He gestured to the map. "It's from Damascus," Elena said softly, her voice thick with emotion, as she ran her eyes over the familiar geometric patterns. It survived. So much else didn't precisely, Croft said, his gaze intense. Survival legacy and the communication that ensures both. That's why we're here. Please walk with me. As they moved through the silent galleries, Croft began to talk. He didn't ask her about her life or how she learned Arabic. He seemed to have already intuited the broad strokes of her tragedy. Instead, he told her about a problem he was facing. Croft Global has committed $500 million to a new humanitarian project, he explained. It's a state-of-the-art sustainable agriculture and water purification initiative, a smart city in miniature designed to be a blueprint for refugee settlement in the modern age. We have the technology, the funding, the political support from the West, but the entire project hinges on a single parcel of land bordering southern Syria. He paused in front of a case displaying ancient handwritten manuscripts. That land is controlled by one man, Sheikh Tariq al-Hamid. He is not a warlord or a politician. He is the leader of a series of tribes that have existed in that region for 1,000 years. He is old, deeply traditional, and profoundly skeptical of outsiders. He has seen Western NOSs come and go, making promises that turn to dust. He trusts no one. Elena listened, her heart beginning to beat faster. She knew of Sheikh Tariq. He was a legend, a man of immense honor and deep learning, known for his wisdom and his adherence to the old ways. "I have sent my best negotiators," Croft continued, his voice tight with frustration. "They arrive with PowerPoint presentations and talk about ROI and scalability. They use UN-certified translators who speak perfect sterile Arabic but understand nothing of the culture. To Sheikh Tar, they are just more noise." He used the same word he had used in the restaurant, "dage," 3 weeks ago. Croft said, stopping and turning to face her directly. "I was in a meeting with him. My team was making a mess of it." The sheikh was about to walk out. In a moment of sheer frustration, I said to him in the best Arabic I could master that I wished he could see the purity of my intention. He looked at me with these ancient, tired eyes and said, "Al-Hilm, say Alaklak, patience is the master of morals." He was telling me that my virtue, my intention would be proven not by my words but by my patience. My team's translator had no idea what he truly meant. He translated it as, "We should be patient." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Last night," Croft said, his eyes locking with hers. "In a restaurant a world away in the middle of New York City, a woman I thought was there only to pour water quoted that exact specific proverb back to me. Now, Elena, tell me, what are the odds of that?" The puzzle pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about language. "You don't need a translator," Elena said, her mind racing. "You need a bridge. You need someone who understands that in his world, a proverb isn't a figure of speech. It's a binding contract of understanding. It's a philosophical foundation." "Yes," Croft said, a look of profound relief on his face. "Exactly. I don't need someone to translate my words. I need someone to translate my meaning, my respect. Sheikh Tariq refuses to continue negotiations until, as he put it, I return with someone who speaks from the chest, not just the tongue." He had quoted her own proverb back to her. "The project is stalled," Croft said flatly, "and winter is coming. There are 500,000 refugees in camps nearby depending on this. Lives are at stake. I am asking you to come with me, Miss Garcia, not as a translator. As my chief cultural advisor, I need you to be my bridge." He named a salary that made Elena's head spin. It was more money than she could imagine, enough to hire the best private investigators in the world to find her family. But it was more than the money. It was a chance to use the knowledge her father had given her, not just to survive, but to build something to help her own people. It was a purpose. But with it came a terrible, cold fear to go back to that region, even a safe part of it, to be that visible, that close to the world that had tried to erase her. She started, her voice faltering. "I need to think about it." "Of course," Croft said, his expression understanding. "But know this, I had my team do a preliminary background check on you last night. I know your real name is Layla Al-Jamil. I know your father was Professor Nabil Al-Jamil, and I know he was a great man. This isn't just a job offer, Ila. It is a chance to honor his legacy. Using her real name was the final devastating move. He knew everything. He had seen straight through her disguise and into her soul. The choice was hers. Remain Elena the ghost, or become Layla the bridge builder. Elena accepted. The 2 weeks that followed were a whirlwind. She was swept from her tiny Queens apartment into the stratosphere of Julian Croft's world. A team of discreet professionals helped her secure an expedited passport under her real name, Layla Alge, citing a diplomatic consultancy. She was given a new wardrobe, a laptop powerful enough to run a small country, and access to every file Croft Global had on the project, the region, and Sheikh Tariq. She worked 18-hour days out of a private study in Croft's penthouse, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking Central Park. She and Croft would spend hours together not discussing business, but history, poetry, and philosophy. She taught him the subtle nuances of honor and respect that governed the Sheikh's world. He, in turn, listened with an attentiveness that she found both humbling and empowering. For the first time since her father's death, she felt intellectually alive, her mind sharp, and her purpose clear. Marcus Thorne, initially wary, grew to respect her, seeing the profound impact she was having on the project's strategy. But the world she had left behind had not forgotten her. The Viper struck on a Tuesday morning. Marcus entered the study, his face grim, holding a tablet. "We have a problem," he said. He showed her the screen. It was an article on a notorious financial gossip blog, a site known for its vicious takedowns and insider trading rumors. The headline was explosive. Julian Croft's mystery woman humanitarian project, compromised by suspected extremist ties. The article, penned under a pseudonym, was a masterpiece of insinuation and poison. It detailed the bizarre scene at Aurelia, painting Elena or the mysterious Arabic-speaking waitress as a plant. It hinted that she had been strategically placed to infiltrate Croft's operations. It dug up her past, twisting her family's flight from Syria not as an escape from tyranny, but as a suspicious exodus. It didn't outright accuse her of being an extremist, but it used phrases like unvetted links to radicalized regions and questions surrounding her father's political activities. The source of the information was obvious. The intimate details of the scene at the restaurant, twisted and malicious, could only have come from one person, Chad Warrington. Humiliated and vengeful, he had decided to destroy the woman who had been the instrument of his embarrassment. The blood drained from Illa's face. This was her worst nightmare realized. The very visibility that had given her purpose was now being used as a weapon against her. This wasn't just a smear campaign against a consultant. It was an attack on a refugee, leveraging the vilest stereotypes to destroy her. "The board is panicking," Marcus said, his voice tight. "The project is already politically sensitive. An accusation like this, however baseless, could be used by our opponents to kill it completely. They're demanding we cut ties with you immediately." Despair washed over Illa. She had been a fool to think she could escape her past. Chad Warrington's petty revenge had the potential to not only ruin her, but to sabotage a project that could save thousands of lives. The door to the study opened, and Julian Croft walked in. He had clearly already seen the article. His face was like stone. Illa braced herself for the inevitable. He was a businessman. She was a liability. He would have to fire her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'll pack my things. I never wanted to jeopardize your work." Croft walked over to the tablet, read the headline again, and let out a short, sharp, humorous laugh. "Pack your things," he said, turning to her. "Lila, you're not going anywhere. You are going to the airport. Our flight leaves in 3 hours. Illa stared at him, confused. "But the board, the article, the board works for me, not the other way around." Croft said, his voice dropping to that dangerously quiet tone she remembered from the restaurant. "And as for this article, they've made a very, very big mistake. They attacked one of my people. They think I'm a businessman. They've forgotten I'm a predator." He turned to Marcus. "Get our legal team. I want them to file a Lyle suit against this blog for $500 million by noon. Get our security division. I want a full forensics workup on Chad Warrington. His finances, his communications, his everything. I want to know who he paid to write this and where the money came from. I want him ruined by sundown." His gaze softened as he looked back at Illa. This isn't your fault. This is the desperate tantrum of a pathetic child. We are not going to be stopped by pathetic children. Sheikh Tariq is expecting us. Let's not be late." In that moment, Layla understood the true nature of Julian Croft's power. It wasn't just his money. It was his ferocious, unyielding loyalty. He had seen the attack for what it was, not just a threat to his project, but an injustice against her. And he was bringing the full weight of his empire to bear in her defense. As she rushed to prepare for Furulio for her flight, a small, fierce sense of hope ignited within her. She was no longer a ghost running from the shadows. She was walking back into the world. And this time, she was not alone. The journey to Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad's encampment was a passage through time itself. Julian Croft's Gulfstream G700, a pinnacle of modern engineering and silent luxury, had deposited them on a private error strip carved into the rust-cold earth. From there, they transferred to a convoy of rugged, sand-beaten land cruisers. The transition was jarring. Within minutes, the air-conditioned sterility of the jet was replaced by the raw, elemental power of the desert. The landscape was a stark and beautiful canvas of ochre and sand stretching to a horizon that shimmered in the immense, unforgiving heat. For Croft's team of engineers and lawyers, it was an alien world. For Illa, it felt like a homecoming. The dry air, thick with the scent of dust and wild, hardy herbs, was the scent of her childhood memories. The encampment was not a primitive collection of tents, but a well-ordered community nestled in the protective curve of a massive rock formation. The Sheikh's majlis, his place of counsel, was a vast open-air tent. Its heavy canvas sides rolled up to welcome the breeze, while providing shade from the relentless sun. Luxurious, deep-piled carpets in intricate patterns of crimson and indigo covered the ground, and dozens of cushions were arranged in a large circle. In the center, a small, expertly tended fire brewed coffee in a traditional brass dala, its aromatic steam mingling with the sweet scent of burning frankincense. Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad was an imposing figure, a man who seemed carved from the very rock that sheltered his people. His face was a roadmap of deep lines, etched by sun and wisdom. His beard was a cascade of snow white, and his eyes, dark and piercingly intelligent, seemed to hold the quiet, patient wisdom of 1,000 years. He sat opposite Julian Croft, with Layla seated respectfully to Croft's side. The Sheikh's advisors, men with equally weathered faces, and Croft's technical team were arranged around them, a study in contrasts between bespoke suits and flowing traditional robes. The negotiations had been slow, deliberate, and layered, spanning 2 full days. Ila had been the orchestra's conductor, not merely the first violin. She was the vital link, transforming the cold, hard language of the West into the poetic, honor-bound dialect of the desert tribes. A moment on the first day had set the tone. One of Croft's lead engineers, a brilliant man named David Chen, had been explaining the solar farm's efficiency. "It will conquer the sun," he'd said with pride, meaning to convey its power. Layla saw the Sheikh's advisors stiffen. In their world, one did not speak of conquering nature. One lived in harmony with it. Without missing a beat, Illa had softened the translation. This technology, she had said in flawless Arabic, does not seek to conquer the sun, which is a gift from the Almighty. Rather, it humbly accepts the sun's generosity and gathers its light so that even after it has set its warmth, can continue to nurture your homes and your children. David Chen looked confused for a second, but the tension in the tent dissipated, replaced by appreciative murmurs. From that moment on, Croft's team deferred to her completely. She was their bridge over a vast cultural chasm. Now, on the afternoon of the second day, they had reached the final impasse. All technical specifications were agreed upon. All logistical plans were laid out. All that remained was the foundation upon which the entire structure would rest. Mr. Croft Shikhtar said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet tent, his words flowing through Layla. "You have brought with you an honorable tongue. This young woman, Layla al-Jamil, speaks with the spirit of her ancestors. You have shown me plans for a marvel of engineering that could turn this harsh land green. But a foundation of steel and concrete is worthless without a foundation of trust. He paused, taking a small cup of coffee from an attendant. For generations, men from your world have come to mine. They have brought promises that evaporate like morning dew. They draw lines on maps and leave behind scars on the land and in the hearts of the people. How do I know that you are different? How do I know that once this agreement is signed, you will not be replaced by a board of faceless men in a distant city who do not share your vision? How do I know that the Croft Global of tomorrow will honor the promises of the Julian Croft of today? It was the crucial question, the one that transcended contracts and clauses. It was a question of legacy and honor. Croft's team shifted uncomfortably. Their legal documents, filled with stipulations and termination clauses, suddenly seemed flimsy and insulting in the face of this ancient, absolute code of honor. Julian Croft looked at Ela, a silent, intense communication passing between them. He had a prepared answer, a legally sound bite about corporate succession and binding international agreements. He had rehearsed it with his lawyers, but looking into the Sheikh's unyielding eyes, he knew it was the wrong answer. It was the language of paper, not of people. He leaned closer to Ela, his voice a low whisper only she could hear. "Forget the script," he murmured. "Trust your instinct. Ask him what his father told him was the most important quality of a leader." Ila's eyes widened slightly. It was an audacious, brilliant pivot. It moved the conversation from a negotiation between corporations to a dialogue between men, between legacies. She turned to the Sheikh, her posture radiating a respect that put him at ease. She posed the question in a formal classical Arabic that was a tribute in itself. The Sheikh was visibly taken aback. Then a thoughtful, distant look came into his eyes. He was no longer a negotiator. He was a son remembering his father. "My father, may his soul find peace," he said slowly, "was a simple man, but a wise one. He said the desert teaches you everything. The wind can erase your footprints in an hour. A flash flood can wash away your camp in minutes. Everything is temporary. Everything, he said, except for one thing. A leader's greatest strength is not his sword or his wealth, but his wafer, his faithfulness, his loyalty to his word, to his people, to his principles. It is the only landmark that cannot be erased by the winds of time." Croft listened intently to Ila's soft translation, a grim, determined smile touching his lips. He knew in that instant that the key to this kingdom was not in a briefcase full of documents, but in the story of the last 2 weeks. He looked at Ila, his eyes giving her both permission and an instruction. He was trusting her not just to translate, but to testify. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She was about to make herself vulnerable in a way she hadn't been since the day her father was taken. She was about to offer her own pain as proof of his honor. She turned her full attention back to the Sheikh, her voice clear and strong, commanding the focus of every person in the tent. "Sheikh Tariq, Mr. Croft does not just understand wafer, he lives by it." She let the declaration hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Just days ago, before we boarded the plane to come here, powerful and cowardly men tried to destroy my name. They learned of my past as a refugee from Syria, and they used my heritage as a weapon. They published lies for the world to see, painting me as a sympathizer to extremists, a dangerous plant sent to infiltrate this very project." A shocked murmur went through the Sheikh's advisors. They looked at her with new eyes, seeing not just a skilled interpreter, but a survivor. By the cold logic of business, Ila continued, her voice resonating with a passion born of real experience. "I became a liability, a risk. The easiest, most logical path for Mr. Croft would have been to dismiss me, to cut his losses, protect his reputation, and find another translator. No one on his board would have blamed him." She paused, making eye contact with the Sheikh, but he did not. He showed wafer. When my own history was used to attack me, he did not abandon me. He stood beside me. He defended my honor as if it were his own. He brought the full force of his empire to bear, not to protect his money, but to protect his person. A waitress he had met only weeks before. His loyalty is not just a word to be written into a contract. It is a shield for those under his care. That is the man who sits before you today. His foundation of trust is not built on paper or promises. It is built on deeds. A profound silence descended upon the Magus, deeper and more complete than any before. The crackle of the coffee fire was the only sound. Ila had laid bare her own story, transforming her trauma from a source of shame into the ultimate testament to Croft's character. She had not just translated his intent, she had embodied it. Sheikh Tariq stared at Julian Croft for a long, unblinking moment, his ancient eyes searching the billionaire's face, looking past the wealth and power, seeking the core of the man. Then he looked at Illa, and his stern expression softened into one of deep paternal respect and understanding. He saw not a pawn, but a partner. He saw proof. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. The deed is the soul of the word. He said, his voice filled with conviction. The word of such a man is worth more than any signature. He turned to his chief advisor, a man with a beard as white as his own, a teeny alkalum. Bring me the pen. The advisor retrieved a wooden box polished smooth with age and opened it to reveal a single elegant fountain pen with an ebony finish. The sheikh took it, his movements imbued with a sense of ceremony. The documents were laid on a low table, and with a firm, steady hand signed his name. A project that would change the lives of hundreds of thousands for a century to come was now a reality. Later that evening, as the sun melted into the horizon in a spectacular blaze of orange and purple, Illa stood with Croft on a high ridge overlooking the valley where the new community would be built. The desert wind was cool now, carrying the scent of the coming night. "My father," Croft said quietly. His voice, filled with an emotion he rarely showed, always told me that a man's real legacy is not what he builds, but who he protects. I didn't fully understand that until recently. He would have been proud of you today, Isla. You did more than build a bridge. You reminded me of the real reason I do any of this. Ila looked out at the vast, peaceful landscape now bathed in the soft twilight. The ghost of Damascus, the frightened waitress in Aurelia. They finally felt like chapters in a book that was finished here. Now she was writing a new one. She was no longer Layla Alj, the survivor. She was Layla Al-Jili, the architect of hope. "There is an old saying, Julian," she said, using his first name for the first time. It felt natural, earned. It is something my own father used to tell me when I would grow frustrated with my studies. He would say, "Manada wajada." Croft smiled, the weariness completely gone from his eyes, replaced by a look of deep, abiding respect and genuine friendship. He who strives, finds. He translated his own Arabic, now more confident, more comfortable. He looked from her face to the valley and back again. We strove, and we found. They stood together in the comfortable silence. Two unlikely allies from two impossibly different worlds watching the first stars begin to appear in the endless desert sky. The quiet, loyal masters of a future they had built together. The story of Layla and Julian Croft is a powerful reminder that the most extraordinary potential often lies hidden in the most unexpected places. It shows us that a person's worth is not defined by their uniform, their job, or their circumstances, but by the richness of their heritage and the strength of their character. Isla's voice was her key, but it was Julian's wisdom to listen that unlocked the door. Their journey reminds us to look past the surface, to challenge our own prejudices, and to recognize the profound power of empathy and respect in a world that is too often divided. What did you find most moving about Layla's transformation? Do you believe a single moment can truly change a person's entire life, Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that uncover the hidden heroes among us. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.